really where we're gonna stay with it. And that's what we've got sort of going on as far as what Mob Talk Radio is going to be up to in the next couple of months. In the fall, we start our TV streaming show, which will be free for on YouTube. We begin shooting in South Philadelphia, I think in October. I'm not sure the exact date. There's 2 or 3 dates we're playing with, but I think by mid-November, we should have 3 episodes done, and we're not going to release like one on Monday, one on Tuesday. It's going to be one for like 3 weeks, 2 for another 3 weeks, 3, and just keep going like that. And that's mainly so that while you guys are catching up watching episode 2, I'm already filming episode 5 or 4. And that's just kind of the way we wanted to roll. I'm looking forward to it. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. It's basically going to be yours truly, who you see on the screen right here, my buddy Chris Gorky, and you never know who's going to show up. And we're going to take you to the mob hotspots. As far as historical, it's definitely as far as historical. I don't want to tell you, oh yeah, we're going to take you to this social club. I'm just because we're not going to do things like that. But it's going to be a bit history, a bit food, a bit conversation. And you never know who's going to show up. You never know what hilarity is going to ensue because you'll get to see more of, I think, how I am in actuality as far as sort of my antics, if you want to call them antics. So we've got the new Visualpodcast. As you guys can see up here, there's my father in the top left-hand corner. There's the Funko Pops horror, which I collect, and there's the Mob Talk Radio logo. So there you go for that. So that's really it as far as where we're going. Now, as far as what we're going to talk today, because I haven't... see, here's the thing. I could have announced a lot of different things that we were doing for this week's show, but I didn't want to do it. I wanted it to kind of be a little bit of a surprise. So basically, we are going to, this week, obviously do a very shortened version of a Q&A. And I'm going to try to bounce back and forth if you're watching this. I'm going to try to bounce back and forth between photos and you guys get to see me. Because if I'm not careful, you guys will just see a background for a while and you won't see me. And that's kind of not what we wanted to do. But we are going to have a short, condensed Q&A this week. We are going to do a Q&A, which I think I said 5 times already. See, I'm already fucking it up. We're going to talk about the Lufthansa heist. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because very rarely do people ever really discuss John Gotti's involvement in that. And it's not really a biographical Lufthansa show. It's basically, we are going to take Goodfellas and some of the things that they said and totally dismantle it and tell you what the reality is and what the truth is of those events. And John Gotti's role was very minimal at best. But when you listen to people tell the Goodfellas story, very seldomly do they tell you the whole entire thing, or they don't tell you at least what Goodfellas got wrong. There's a whole lot of stuff that is just wrong that I think nobody's ever really covered before. They always seem to put out these videos where it's like, you know, you hear Henry Hill and all of this kind of nonsense, and then they tell you like the most wild shit that never happened, or they distort reality. And they don't tell you that Jimmy Burke really killed Tommy DeSimone and why he did it. There's a lot of different things that Goodfellas got wrong, but a lot of it's just because it's Hollywood, and a lot of it's because they took Henry Hill's word for it. Also, coming up in a few weeks, we've got some stuff that really surprised me. It seems like every couple of weeks when I do my Freedom of Information Act request, sometimes they give me nothing and I have to fight with them. Sometimes they send me shit that blows my mind. And so we're going to do a show called The Rat Files. And there's a couple of people that we have talked about on this show historically that turns out they're informants. Did I suspect that the 3 people we're going to talk about were? Yeah, I did. But there was never really anything that I could do or anything that I could provide you that would corroborate that. But now I have stacks of papers that pretty much corroborates what I feared most. And I think when you're going to do stuff like this, it helps to tell the biography of the person you're talking about, number one. Number two, you have to give the background as to why they would even go to the FBI to begin with. And then, well, we know the reason why. But then number three, have paperwork. And so if you're into the visual podcast stuff, you'll be able to see some of that paperwork because we will throw it on the screen in the next couple of weeks. So that's coming up. And we are going to wrap up the show this week talking about South Philadelphia 1990s. Now, a lot of people had been asking me to do this for probably 5 years now. And I stayed away from it because I felt like, what can I add to that that's going to be any different? And then I got to thinking the other day when I was sitting down working out, my week as far as what we were going to talk about. And I said, what if I give them not the whole entire biography of the players, but give them just enough to show that history always repeats itself down there? Why don't I give everybody sort of a street perspective on why and how and who? If you guys think I'm talking about Joey Merlino, I am a little bit, but not to the extent that you would think. A lot of this is just historically looking at the political scene, looking at the jockeying for position, jockeying at the egos, and stuff like that. And so I think me looking at that sort of outside the box and in at the politics and the inner workings, because nobody else can do what I'm going to do with this show today. Nobody else can because they don't know anybody. And they also just have a tendency to piggyback off what George Anastasia and other people say. And not going to do it. That's just, that's not what I'm about. I have this huge light up here. It's fucking hot. Wow. Anyway, that being said, there is one other thing. I'm going to switch right to this for a second. Obviously, if you guys have been watching the news, Rudy Giuliani, and for those of you that are listening to this show, and not watching it, you don't know where the joke is because there's a photo I just put out. So Rudy Giuliani is facing RICO charges, and I don't want to get into the whole political stratosphere of this, but I find it fitting. I find it fitting that Nosferatu is going to go to federal prison. Now, will he? Listen, I don't even think Trump's probably going to go. I got to be honest with you. I don't think they're going to go. I think using the RICO law in this way is a bit of a stretch, especially in Georgia. But it's just funny to see Rudy Giuliani, having to take his photo at the jail in Georgia. To me, that's fucking hilarious. And it's been a long time coming because Rudy Giuliani, whether you like him or not, whatever your political leanings are, the shit that he pulled in the 80s with that RICO law and the way that he used it almost illegally in every instance, withheld evidence in every instance, to me, it's just fitting. And maybe one day we can do a whole entire show about how he railroaded everybody. But if you guys have listened to me for any amount of time, we've talked about Cyrano Salerno, Tony Salerno, and the whole commission trial. But there was a lot of other stuff that Giuliani sort of underhandedly did. He was a shitty mayor. Everybody wants to call him the mayor of America and all this nonsense. But in reality, he really wasn't. He was a scumbag. He was a nickel and dime shitheel. And those are just the facts of it. So I find it really hilarious. And a lot of people have been asking me, what do mob guys think? And everybody's rejoicing. If they had a reason or they ever wanted a reason to throw a motherfucking party, this would be the reason. This would be the absolute fucking reason for the party. Because it's a long time coming and he fucking deserves it. I don't feel bad for him. And I always laugh because, what was it, 2 years ago he was doing that speech and he was outside of a dildo shop. This is the same shit when his makeup was running down his face. He was standing in front of a dildo shop. Like they set up this podium. Here's where Rudy's going to talk. And nobody's paying attention to what's in the background. And I wish I could have found that video because it was epic. It was bronze dildos in the corner. And I'm going, oh my God, nobody fucking looked at what he was doing. But if you've seen the videos of him wearing drag with Donald Trump feeling him up and kissing his fake tits, then there you go. And that's out on YouTube too. That's disturbing. It's very odd. Donald Trump was very hot for Rudy. Hot for Rudy. That's what we need. We need somebody. What if you guys are a musician and you want to have a little fun? Here's what you do. Make a song called Hot for Rudy and send it to me. I don't care how filthy the lyrics are. I'll play it every day just because I think it's fucking hilarious. So if you're a musician and you want to have a little fun, the title has to be Hot for Rudy or the hook has to be Hot for Rudy. Send it to me at mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com. So that's what we've got going on. I welcome everybody to the visual side of this. For when we begin the Lufthansa stuff, I just need everybody to understand that's listening to this on the audio version. If you come over to the visual version, you can see a really kick-ass video. you will see a real kick-ass version of an intro to the Lufthansa heist that I kind of put together the other day. It's kind of cool. So what we're going to do is we are going to do what we typically do. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to get to the Q&A portion of the show. I hope you're enjoying the visual podcast. And if you just are digging the audio, then that's fantastic too. And also, do me a favor. After you watch this or listen to it, shoot me an email at mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. And with that, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to get to the Q&A portion of the show. Stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio.
And now it's time for Mob Talk.
Sets me off to a full on child. Yes, it does. The way you squeeze and tease knocks me to my knees. 'Cause I'm smoking, baby, baby. The way you sway, okay, really wrecks my nerves, and I'm so excited, child. When you push, that you know that.
And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. At this point, we are going to get into the Q&A portion of the show. And normally Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we go Q&A and go over on Facebook. And that is your opportunity to ask any question, organized crime related, that you want to. And if you're not comfortable asking them on Facebook, you can email the show at mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com. And in the text, put Q&A. Now, because I was so busy making sure this setup was actually going to work, it's a lot of work. I didn't get to a lot of the questions. So I'm going to recycle those next week. And hopefully, as the weeks sort of get longer and we get more into the fall, into the winter, hopefully I will get better at doing what I'm doing now. Because what people don't understand is this is not a matter of coming in here and simply just recording for 2 hours straight. No, I record one segment, edit, come back in, record, edit. So I can't, like on a podcast, I could go straight for 2 hours, 2.5 if I wanted to. In this particular case, I can't. So I have to stop after each segment and then I have to start editing everything. So the whole entire process just got worse. Now, when we do our live shows, this is the sequence and this is how we're going to do things with the live shows. We have used StreamYard in the past, but we're no longer to use StreamYard for that. This is a more seamless way of doing things. And I can, put films and videos and stuff like that with one push of a button. So it's all queued up in the machine. And so that's the way we're going to do that. So I'm going to try to bounce back and forth between my picture here, but we're going to get into the Q&A portion of the show. Jake, I got your question about my father. I'm going to write down a whole bunch of things about my dad and use that. I just was so caught up in trying to get all this technology straightened out this week that my brain is shot. All right. So Jamie asked, during Toto Riina's reign, is there anyone from Ndrangheta that could rival his power, or did they wait for him to be out of the picture to really stretch their legs? Nah, to my knowledge, really not anybody. I mean, Toto Riina had, too much power, almost too much power. And maybe saying too much power is sort of a bad thing. But in Toto Riina's position, you have to look at the totality of his ascension to the throne as well. And what I mean by that was, listen, he was battle tested and he was valued, and he valued the men that were before him. Luciano Leggio, for example, I mean, he really kind of came in underneath the Luciano Leggio, and he learned from him, and he learned everything that happened like in the first 15 years they were together, or 10 years they were together. And that was sort of Riina's impetus, if there was one. Leggio was Riina before Riina was Riina. And the difference is that Riina learned from Leggio what to do and what not to do. The mere fact that Leggio went after, Michael Navarra and his entire family, that lasted a few years. It was a ton of murders. Then they basically took on anybody who was a threat, and they didn't stop until everybody was fucking dead. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? So between 81 and 83, Toto Riina takes on Stefano Bontide, the Inzarellos, the Badalamentes, and they just kept fighting each group, getting rid of them and taking over. Ndrangheta as a whole is bigger than the 5 families of New York City could ever be combined. Maybe not in the 1940s. But, Ndrangheta is just more powerful than what we know as Cosa Nostra these days. Just being straight with you. All right. Hey, Jeff, I apologize for not saying hi on the live last week. I only had my phone at the time. Can you play Ritorname by Dean Martin? I can't this week, William, but I will next week. Everything, all the music you're going to hear this week was on the charts, top 100 in 1975. Why I chose 1975, I really don't know, but I just did. So there we go. But I will make sure, William, I get to your question next week. I mean, I promise to. I hope to. Dean, what's up, Jeff? Love the show. I always wonder, how did Ralph Scopo, just being a soldier, was in charge of the Concrete Club. Okay, you wrote Concert Club. That's why I got confused. Concrete Club. Shouldn't a captain or better have had that type of responsibility? It was a lot of money to trust with a soldier. Thank you. Well, Dean, it all depends on the captain that's in charge, right? How good is your acumen? What are you good at? Look, some guys can make a dollar out of a dime, and others can't do nothing right. And I think the reality is, if you can make it, they're going to let you make it. But if you can't make a dime, you can't rub two dimes together, forget about it. You're done. Remember, you're only valuable if you can murder or make money. And these days, the emphasis is on making money. And in 1980, it was pretty much almost to the point where it was just about money. But there was still a lot of murder and mayhem in the 80s in New York City. If you go back to The Sopranos, and I'm probably, maybe it's the second season, Christopher Moltisanti, he gets inducted, and Paulie gives him his bookmaking operation. Paulie gets his cut. Christopher gets his cut the first 2 weeks out. Christopher allows his ego to interfere with what he knows what to do. And Paulie tells him. And what ends up happening is Christopher gets hammered like that first 2 weeks. He's net losses. So he has to go and scheme to make more money just to pay Paulie off. But Paulie tells him, I don't give a fuck what happened to you. I still get my cut regardless of your bad week. And that's an example of Paulie would have never given him those rackets ever if Christopher wasn't capable. Because the last thing a guy is going to do is hand somebody a racket and say, all right, it's yours. Whether you sink or swim, who gives a fuck? No, they do care because they want that money. So if, and there's always an ebb and flow and a learning process with everything, right? But if, it's what we call learning curves, right? But if somebody out of the gate can't handle that responsibility whatsoever, and they cannot make it work, then they're never going to be handed that to begin with. And that's just the reality. If Gigante kills Costello, do you think Vito kills Gigante? No. If Gigante kills Costello, do you think Vito kills Gigante? That doesn't make any sense. Why would Vito kill Gigante? Maybe you sort of asked that wrong. Here's the way I think that all would go down. And I think what you meant was, I hope you meant Anastasia. Because it wouldn't make much sense if Vinny the Chin was told by Genovese to kill Costello, why would Vito Genovese kill somebody who he told? Okay. Oh boy. So here's what I think sort of happens. If Costello gets killed, I think Anastasia goes absolutely apeshit and kills everybody. I'm just being honest with you. But what is odd, and probably a better question that we should ask, is that on the night of May 7th of 1957, Frank Costello, obviously, as we know, walks through his hotel door and Chin shoots him and Chin doesn't get the job done. But this is on May 7th of 57. But Albert Anastasia isn't killed until October 25th of 57. And so here's the bigger question. Why the fuck did Albert Anastasia not react to that? Why didn't he react immediately? And I never thought about it before. I never thought about that. Why does he not react? And I'm curious as to what all of you think. So reach out to the show, mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com. And let me know what your theory is as to why Anastasia doesn't react. Because if Anastasia reacts, cup of coffee. Oh God, do you guys remember? I don't know if you guys were ever watching YouTube. There used to be this guy who would come on every morning. He was a real creepy dude. He looked like a borderline like Kid Diggler. I shit you not. And his name was Al. And he goes, "Good morning, cup of coffee." Guy was so creepy. Beyond creepy. But no, I want to know what you guys think. Why does Anastasia not react to that? Like, I got to be honest. If he had reacted, it might have saved his life. But he doesn't react, and I don't know if he's, laying it out to play it out, or I don't know. I've never understood that. But there was ample time. Ample time. All right. I know this question would vary greatly guy to guy, but what is your average ballpark guess on how much your average made man makes in a crew. If there's about 10 guys in a crew in a regular family, I just can't see how there is enough rackets to go around where most of your average made men make good money. There's too many variables. So I can't, as much as you want, as much as you want me to give you an answer to that, I just don't think I can. Look, in New York City, they make more in Philadelphia. They make more than guys in Philly, right? So most of that answer is going to be based on the area and what those families' rackets are. I mean, all I can do is simply give you the bottom end versus the high end. And I know what you're asking, but you also have to consider the time period, like what are 60s, 50s, 40s, 80s, 90s, zeros. What allergies too, driving me crazy. Like in reality, what time period? Because there is a large gap between the old days versus 1980 versus now. I mean, there's always going to be enough rackets to go around. And the thing is about being an organized crime is you have to be inventive. Bottom line. Scheming, union, theft, drugs. I mean, there's a lot of ways to make money, right? But if you're going to say traditional rackets, look, nobody owns whorehouses no more. Here in New York City, that's gone to the Russians, the cartel, and the Chinese. And that's $1 billion business, yet the Italians let it go. And don't give me the moral ambiguity argument of, well, they just don't like hookers. No, it's not it. I mean, numbers, they're still a thing, but they're not a big thing anymore. And that's another $1 billion business that went down the fucking shitter. Shakedowns, extortion on your block are no longer a thing. And it's done more of at an epic level or a construction level these days. A made guy, listen, in my opinion, a made guy should be making over $200,000 a year. If he's not, he should fucking call it a day and go get a real job. I mean, the reality is the top 10% of your guys make all of the money. And everyone else barely scrapes by. That's usually how it is. Henry Hill, because we're going to talk about that today. Henry Hill couldn't rub a nickel and a penny together to get himself in the positive. This guy was a bum, and this guy had, and I'm not saying that just because he's a fucking rat. I'm saying it because he had never had any fucking money. He was not some scheming fucking guy who had money. His wife was on welfare almost their entire marriage. That should tell you how rich Henry fucking Hill was. But like I said, the reality is the top 10% of the guys make all of the money and everybody else barely scrapes by. Should it be that way? No. But that's the way it is. And this is why you see more mob guys today having 2, 3, 4, 5 legitimate businesses. They flood the money from illicit into legal. And that's just how it goes. And if a mob guy was smart, he would funnel his money through a bingo hall. Don't get me started on that because I have a whole theory on that. But that's, that's just how it is. And I cannot tell you how many made guys that I know who have a ton of different businesses. And it's not exactly a financial windfall to be an organized crime. It really isn't. Especially in these days, but in bigger cities, in bigger cities, there's bigger opportunities. And I think that not that anybody asked me, but I would go back to the basics. Every strip joint, every rub and tug is going to be paying me a percentage each week to operate, or it's legs and lights out. Bottom line. And for me to give you a ballpark, like, listen, what's if you're not making over 30 grand, like whatever minimum fucking salary is in this country, if you're not making more than that, you might as well just go work at fucking McDonald's. Bottom line. I was watching a video on this. Okay, we're going to skip that. Hold on. I was watching a video on this and wondering if you could do a show or shows on Ndrangheta in Australia. There's a lot of history of Italian organized crime. As far as he knows, Ndrangheta has been in the Australia since the 20s, or maybe even before. It was only a couple of years ago. Australian authorities confirmed they have 51 Mafia clans in Australia, 40 Calabrian, and 11 Sicilian. It's fascinating. Well, they also have the Greek Mafia, the Camorra, the Lebanese Mafia, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'll never forget, I said that on a show. Anthony. And people were like, you're lying. There's not that many clans in Australia. And I'm like, okay, don't believe me. Like, they also didn't believe that the Rizzutos were worldwide either, and they were. But what the fuck are you going to do? You know, you can tell the horse the water hole's down the street, but if the horse ain't gonna go to it, fuck it. But yeah, we will cover an Australian show. Back in Italy, there was a war between the Sicilians and Italians, and in the HBO movie Gotti, one said that Castellano was from a certain part of Italy and Gotti was from the Sicilians. Actually, Castellano was Sicilian, John Gotti was Neapolitan. And the reference point, Lee, was that they were showing just the bigotry amongst Calabrians, Sicilians, Neapolitans. It's just the way it is. Gotti is Neapolitan. And I'll never forget, that stupid broad, Victoria Gotti, was in Italy, and she goes, Gotti means lion in Italian, right? Gotti means cat. And they told her, they're like, no, it means cat. And she's like, ow. Like, dingbat. Total fucking dingbat, that broad. Sicilians typically, and I'm not trying to brandish anybody that listens to my show that may be Sicilian this way, but Sicilians typically only like just Sicilians, okay? Calabrians and Neapolitans work together well, but it's just that Sicilians have a way about them. I've always kind of aligned more with Calabrians. My family has roots in Reggio, as well as Sorrento. So, I have both sort of coursing through my veins, so to speak, but not Sicilian at all. Have not a percentage, not a drop of Sicilian in me. But if you go back to many of the old-time bosses, Masseria, Maranzano, they felt the same way. They didn't trust anybody that was not Sicilian. So that was the reference point in the film, is that they were trying to show the bigotry amongst Italians based on where their roots came from. All right, let's see. What was behind the relationship between Tony Accardo and Paul Ricca that allowed them to work so effectively together? In a profession where power is not easily shared, they were able to put aside egos and co-run the Chicago family for many years, while other families across the country fought over power, position, and territory. In order for that to have happened, these two must have been really tight, but I never hear any stories about how they made that bond, save for the fact that they both got their start under Capone. Any ideas? I can't give you any direct evidence, Jake, but I think that they both had the same ideals. And that's really the big thing. I mean, if you have two guys with very opposing viewpoints, then you're going to get something like Vito Genovese and Mangano. Okay? And that's what you end up with. You end up with Gotti Gravano. You end up with Casso Amuso. And there really are, Ricca and Accardo are a two-headed dragon who are able to have sort of the same exact mindset, the same ideals, the same beliefs. And that's kind of what you need to have. And I'm sure they knocked heads at times, because everybody does. But the bottom line for guys like that, it always revolved around money. Money was the bottom line. And I also think as a tandem, they were actually stronger together. Accardo on his own was tough and strong. Ricca was the same way. But together, that's a true powerhouse. And I think to be on the same page and to be willing to murder and to get a point across. And it made them juggernauts. And neither one of them really ever gets hammered, dies in prison like everybody else. So the difference between the two men individually is actually kind of interesting, because Accardo was born in Chicago, whereas Paul Ricca was born in the Kingdom of Naples. And Ricca was actually a made guy in the Camorra before he ever comes to New York City in 1920 and then immigrates, westward. Accardo gets in the mob through Tony Capizzo, who helps him run the Circus Cafe gang. And the gang was like, it was like a pulling pool for Cosa Nostra. And it was Jack McGurn who sees Accardo, sees what he's capable of, and he brings him into the crew. Paul Ricca, on the other hand, comes over here already with prestige. But it's actually in Cuba where he meets Diamond Joe Esposito, who was at the time over in Cuba. And he was doing a couple of, everybody was in Cuba at the time, and this is like well before everything, but he was in there doing some illegal stuff. And he ends up bringing in Paul Ricca into the fold as far as bootlegging. And they were bootlegging from Cuba to Kentucky to Chicago. And it's while he's working at Esposito's restaurant as a maitre d', as we all know, that he begins to rub shoulders with Al Capone and others, and that's how he gets pulled into that. So they both have a bit of a different path of how they got there. But it's interesting to see them side by side. But Rico was a made guy when he came to this country. But if you look at the log lines of their lives, it's very similar. It's interesting. And I encourage everybody to do that on their own. Just look at the two lives, look at the two men, look at their backgrounds. And it's just, I marvel at it. Because while they may have been a little different to some in some regards, together they had the same thought process. And that's what's important when you run an organized crime family. Were there any influential women who made positive impact or influence in Cosa Nostra? Well, in Italy, sure, of course, but not here in the United States. Not in the way that you'd be asking. And believe it or not, over in Italy, women have taken over crime families. In some cases, the husband goes away and leaves his wife in charge of the crime family, and they can run the mafia, if not better than the men. And it's turns out they're more violent than the men are. The men might be forgiving. The women, fuck that shit. No way. As far as over here, I think Virginia Hill was probably influential to some degree anyway, because she was sent to South America and Mexico to basically fuck cartel leaders, keep her ears open to what she could hear there, and keep the drug routes open. And the reason why is she spoke fluent Spanish. The Italians didn't, so they sent her there to sort of be their guide in eyes and ears out there. And she was able to keep the drug routes open, and she was able to funnel money for the mob. And that was her main role with them. And women, I think, play, and we should, nobody's ever done this show before, but how important is the role of women in organized crime families? Because even though it may not be internally, it's externally. Because women are the ones that are responsible for helping hide the money, for putting their name on the bank accounts, for raising the family, for playing people against each other. Women have been used from day one to help their husbands achieve what they want. And that's why anybody that plays this idea that women don't have any clue what their husbands do, like, come on, it's bullshit. But maybe we should do a show about the influence of women in organized crime. How are mob guys feeling about how are mob guys feeling about Rudolph Fuckhead's RICO charge? Well, I get the sense everybody's happy about it. Everybody's laughing at him, garbage in, garbage out. And that's one thing about mob guys, right? I mean, politically, a lot of organized crime guys may align with Donald Trump. And it's not because they believe in what Donald Trump says. It's because Donald Trump says whatever the fuck he wants. That's what they like. Because listen, Donald Trump's a fucking criminal fuck himself, right? So, but I think Giuliani's different. Nobody's ever liked Rudy Giuliani and his grandstanding and all the shit he pulled on mob guys. Nobody has ever. I mean, now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever heard anybody associated with organized crime say a positive fucking thing about Rudy Giuliani. But I can tell you this for certain. A few gentlemen that I have talked to in the last couple of days, all said the same thing. He's got rat written all over his face. And I think he does, but we're going to see. If you could have been a part of any sit-down that has ever happened, which sit-down would you have been a part of? Probably Joe Magliocco. And for those of you that know, Magliocco and Bonanno were going to conspire together to kill the whole entire commission. Magliocco hires Joe Colombo to take out the fucking guys. Colombo runs to guard Gambino, tells him everything, and then here you go. Joe Magliocco gets sent for. He has to sit in front of the commission and answer himself. Bonanno flees to fucking Montreal out of fear. But I would have loved to have been at that one, because the one thing that I would have done differently is I would have punished Magliocco for scheming with Bonanno to whack the whole entire commission. Absolutely. Fine him. Take 75 grand from him. But I would have told him this. If you go and you kill Joe Bonanno, I'm going to allow you, you'll never be the head of the family again, but I will allow you to continue to earn, but I want you to kill Joe Bonanno. It's plain and simple. That's what I would have done. And had Bonanno been killed, look at all the shit it would have stopped. It would have stopped information coming to the feds, because Joe Bonanno and Bill Bonanno all ratted. And for those of you who keep saying, where's the proof? Oh, it's coming when we do the rat files. Because I've got shit you won't believe now. So yeah, I mean, I would have loved to have been there. And I would have said, look, fine him $75K. You can never be boss of a family. But if you whack Bonanno, I'll let you keep earning. And I think if you do that, because you have to realize Magliocco on his own could not attain the backing to pull that shit off. Okay. And for those of you that will argue, well, but what's to say down the line he doesn't do the same shit? Well, if you hold him to the point where you say you got to whack Joe Bonanno, you know, that would have solved it. Why not just cut the head off the fucking snake? Like, that's kind of how I see things. Who do you think had a worse time with indictments, the five families or the satellite crews? The five families were under the lens of the law, but New York is massive and very easy to hide in. Not anymore. New York is not easy to hide in. Satellite factions deal with smaller cities, but being the only family in town makes you easier to get noticed. I mean, I understand your point, and it's a good point. I mean, look at Philadelphia, right? You know, they are by proxy, smaller than most crime families in New York City, but they also have allegedly have had the same boss for 25 years, and you can't say that about New York. And so there's an argument for both points. On one hand, yeah, being smaller presents its problems, but it also lowers your odds that you're going to have a rat in every single fucking indictment. But also with smaller families, they have to worry about being very picky to whom they're going to associate with and let around. Whereas bigger families don't have to worry nearly as much. So it goes both ways. But for me, look at Philly, still standing like a fucking monument. Weathered, beaten, and still standing. And I think the five families have it worse, to be honest with you, because of the totality of the damage. Smaller families, they may lose 3, 4, 5 fringe guys. But their entire hierarchy does not get touched. Maybe 1, maybe 2. Look at what happened to the Columbos last year. Their whole entire hierarchy wiped out in one thing. That's you're not insulating yourself. You know, and that's the difference. Back then, do you think, hey Jeff, do you think some May guys whose blood families were Calabrian, Naples, and other parts of Italy and non-Sicilians, do you think guys felt out of place or even insecure being part of Cosa Nostra? Or even knowing Cosa Nostra, the fact that it's a Sicilian thing, and a lot of Sicilians, even after the creation of the commission, still held their old world belief system. Can we also get a Ron Previty? There you go. There's your Ron Previty. You know, I kind of agree with you, and I think this is once again more along the log lines of just ethnicity and where you come from. But I think Costello felt that way, especially in the early days. But I think the reality is it comes down to money. Guys have an unwavering kind of way about them when the money starts coming in. They seem to forget about all the things they fucking hated to begin with. But that's why Luciano was so integral to the mob, because he didn't see things by heritage or where you came from. It was money's fucking green. He valued a man's intelligence before anything else. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was some sort of kind of bigotry going on. But I think money has a way of making the sun come out even on a fucking rainy day. And that's just the reality. That's just fucking reality. I was wondering, now that you've wrapped up the Kennedy crime family series, what do you suppose their endgame was politically? Do you suppose Joe Sr. and Sons had some kind of radical-minded agenda? Or were they just a bunch of power-hungry opportunists who bit off more than they could chew and then just got what was coming to them? I don't know, world domination perhaps? I don't know. I think Joe Kennedy wanted to control the world. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with me there. But in all honesty, I think, you know, John would have been content just being a fucking president. But in totality, I mean, I think the Kennedys wanted a fucking dynasty. Can you imagine if we had had 24 straight years of the Kennedys? Imagine that. John 8, Bobby 8, Teddy 8, 28 straight 24 straight fucking years of them. And I think that was the plan. Imagine the money the Kennedys could have made for 28 years. Uninterrupted, a dynasty, and God knows they probably have the fucking grandchildren being tutored at some fucking prep school bullshit, so they could become president too. That's what I think Joe Kennedy wanted. I got to be honest with you. I think Joe Kennedy wanted to control everything. He wanted to be the head of the world. That's just kind of him. You know, I think his viewpoint was world domination, but not like a Hitler type of domination, more like I want to be the most influential and powerful man in the world. And I think the lesson that you can take from the Kennedy crime family is that just opportunity isn't enough. I mean, you have to outfuck the other guy. And Joe was pretty good at that. Joe was really good at outfucking everybody. But the acumen or the gene pool, it fell short of Joe's inner aspirations. And so I'm not really sure exactly what Joe fucking wanted at the end of the day. But I think we can all agree on some sort of level that he wanted to be in control of everything. That's just the reality of it. That's just the reality of it. All right, so here's what we got going on. We're going to go to a break, and when we come back, for those of you that are listening to the show, it may be blank space for like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to try to fix it audio-wise so you don't hear it, but because we are going to begin the next segment by playing a video entrance to the Lufthansa heist, and we're going to distort some of the myths. Well, not distort. We're going to tell you the truth about what was real on Goodfellas and what wasn't. We're going to talk about Henry Hill a little bit. And don't forget, we're going to talk about South Philadelphia in the 1990s, and it's part 1 this week. It's probably going to be 3 parts. There's a lot to digest. There's a lot to talk about. So stay tuned to Mob Talk Radio. Come on back here, and we'll see everybody in a few.
Let me look at the cream. Got the cake,
make him an offer he can't refuse.
I gotta say, a lot of people have been asking me where I'm getting the Mozzarella Boss sweatshirt. A lot of people have seen me in the streets here in New York, and they ask, what is this? Where can I get it? And a lot of you have seen my photos on Instagram wearing the Mozzarella Boss sweatshirt. So my buddy Rob Nestor, here's the deal. If you want to learn how to make fresh mozzarella, there's only one guy you need to see, and that's the Mozzarella Boss. He's available for weddings, corporate and private events, restaurants, food expos, and private classes. Making fresh mozzarella is what Rob is all about. So, if you're interested in learning how to make mozzarella the old school way, you gotta see Rob. You can visit his website, mozzarellaboss.com. And if you want a Mozzarella Boss sweatshirt like I got, also visit his website, mozzarellaboss.com. As well, you can follow him on Instagram at Mozzarella Boss. So, if you're interested in getting a shirt, sweatshirt, any kind of merchandise, or you want to talk to him, or you want to learn how to make original Italian fresh mozzarella, there's only one guy to see, mozzarellaboss.com.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
I know I'd go from rags to riches if you would only say you care. And though my pocket may be empty, I'd be a millionaire. My clothes may still be torn and tattered, but in my heart I'd be a king. Your love is all that ever mattered. It's everything. So open your arms and you'll open the door to every treasure that I'm hoping for. Hold me and kiss me and tell me you're mine evermore. Must I forever be a beggar whose golden dreams will not come true? Or will I go from rags to riches? My fate is up to you.
At this point in the show, we are going to get into Goodfellas, and was John Gotti involved in Lufthansa? One of the things that we are going to talk about is what Goodfellas got right, what Goodfellas got wrong. And I could sit here and do a whole entire show on this, but I'm not going to. I just wanted to sort of talk about a couple of different things and just kind of go from there. So probably the most quotable mob movie in existence, and probably the most realistic mob film from at least the vantage point of violence, is Goodfellas. And the thing about Goodfellas from the historical viewpoint is how much they indeed actually got wrong. And it's not to diminish the film, and that's really not the case at all. But the fact is, while the story is based on Henry Hill, the realities are simply that Henry Hill was actually a fucking nobody in that life. He really was a nobody. Was he an associated member? Absolutely. But by street standards, he really was not anybody that integral to what was going on. He wasn't a wealthy guy, and he never had two dimes to rub together. This is not a show to downgrade the film. but it's to showcase really fact versus fiction. And so where do you begin? And the truth is, if you accept that Henry Hill was completely honest, and that he was a figure, a head guy or a big guy, then it if you believe everything Henry Hill says, then of course it goes down as one of the best films in the history of the genre. But the reality is that Henry Hill was a minor player in the grand scheme of things. And I want to take you to a scene, the scene when Henry Hill is in the shower and he hears about the Lufthansa heist. He begins to cheer on Jimmy. Everybody remembers that scene. But the reality of that scene, is appropriate because if you're making a movie, yeah, he's cheering, he's excited because it actually happened. But in reality, Henry Hill had nothing to do with that heist. Nothing. And he didn't get a dime out of it. And what Goodfellas distorts is that it was in fact Tommy DeSimone who concocted the plan and takes it to Paul Vario. Paulie did not want Tommy DeSimone pulling that job, and he explains to him that once Jimmy Burke gets out of prison, because at the time Jimmy was in prison, once he gets out, he wants Jimmy to take over the planning of the heist and put it all together. And those are the little facts that the movie doesn't really quite explain. Another great part of the film, at least one of the most talked about sequences, is the murder of Billy Batts, played by Frank Vincent. The reality is, not only does the movie exploit reality, but the authors in the mob genre newbies fail to explain the background of what that situation really fucking was. So Billy Batts, real name William Benvena, and you can see it on the screen if you're following along. He was a Gotti associate, a Gambino associate. He had just gotten out of prison for narcotics. But let's talk about the reality of what happened. Prior to going away on a narcotics charge, his rackets, specifically loan sharking, were actually handed to Jimmy Burke. They were actually given to Jimmy Burke. And Jimmy Burke was an associated member of the Lucchese crime family. Why those rackets were handed over to Jimmy likely had more to do with the fact that Jimmy was universal. Meaning, while he was an associated member of the Lucchese crime family, he was also a freelance guy. He could work with anybody. So as Benvena gets out of prison, he expects money and he expects to get his loan sharking racket back. The problem was Jimmy Burke had turned that loan sharking operation into $1 million operation. So under Jimmy Burke, it was more profitable. And what happened that night at Henry Hill's bar was an escalation of events that the public and authors and mob genre newbies just don't get right. And you know the famous line, go get your fucking shine box. It never happened. The facts of that night you're about to hear. So when Billy Batts gets out, as I said, he expects his rackets back. He goes to see Jimmy Burke at Henry's bar. When he approaches Jimmy about the issue, Jimmy tells him basically to go fuck himself. And Jimmy could do that because the profits that he turned over to the Gambinos made everybody happy. Benvena, who was close to John Gotti, disagreed with that. So Benvena leaves and he allegedly goes to see John Gotti or somebody other than Gotti. I'm not sure if it was Gotti, I got to be honest, but he went to go see somebody about it. And what people failed to mention is that John Gotti was in a position, where he worked with Jimmy Burke at JFK, and the two knew each other well. Gotti was not in a position at that time to order the death or to oversee a beef. Whatever Gotti did tell Billy Batts, we're never going to know because we weren't there. Obviously, the loan sharking racket was going to stay put in Jimmy's control. Now, why would they take away something that Jimmy was making them millions of dollars off of? And that's where people sort of, in their own way, get this twisted. Because a lot of people say, well, John Gotti killed him. John Gotti killed Tommy DeSimone over all of this crazy shit, and this is what it had to do with. But John Gotti is not going to kill Jimmy Burke, number one. Number two, you take a guy who wasn't making a lot of money with a loan sharking racket, you hand it to Jimmy Burke to oversee it, and now they're making millions upon millions. Why on earth are they going to give it back to Billy Batts at that point? They're not going to. So like I said, I'm not exactly sure what John Gotti or whoever else, representative of the Gambino, said to Billy Batts. But either way, it was going to stay put. But the answer is simply, like I said, is they're not going to take it from Jimmy Burke. Billy Batts, who gets pissed off, goes back to see Jimmy to complain once again. And he walks in, he's pissed off, he enters the bar, he sees Jimmy. And Jimmy already knew ahead of time that Billy Batts had gone back and complained to the Gambino crime family about him, which infuriated Jimmy Burke to no end. So when Benvena comes back into the bar that night in question, looking for trouble, Jimmy Burke was ready for it. Words get exchanged. Henry Hill is there. Jimmy Burke is there. And Tommy DeSimone is there. And they're just waiting for Billy Batts to complain. And he does. And Jimmy Burke begins to pistol whip and beat Billy Batts. And Tommy does help out. And the beating was awful. And he dies as a result. The body was dismembered and ditched. The trunk scene from Goodfellas never happened. He was wrapped in a rug and he was taken out the back door and buried. Dismembered and buried. Tommy never had a beef with Benvena, other than just defending Jimmy Burke. Now, where the story seems to twist is that the Gambinos were pissed once Benvena disappeared. They wanted answers, and this is when the premise in the film for why Tommy DeSimone gets killed, this is why this comes up. And that's so far from the truth. It's laughable. Some have even made the claim that John Gotti shot and killed Tommy for the death of Billy Batts and for the death of Foxy Jethro. The Jethro issue was over a girl. Tommy was dating Foxy's sister and was regularly beating her up. When Foxy found out, he wanted to kill Tommy, but Tommy gets to him first. It's a separate issue. It didn't help that Tommy was a cokehead. And the mob looked at him specifically like a loose cannon. He was on drugs, he beat women, and he knew about the Lufthansa heist. These are all a culmination of events which are going to get Tommy DeSimone in trouble. And he becomes a problem for Jimmy in a million different ways. Now, the story gets warped, as I said, about John Gotti, Tommy, and Jimmy. Reality is, Jimmy was killing everybody that was associated with this heist. Everybody. Anybody that sort of was going to get a kickback off of this was going to get killed. Just the bottom line. Why pay a cut to somebody when you just kill them and not pay them a fucking dime? Why give anybody a cut? But because Tommy hit Foxy, there was a death warrant on his head. Gotti was no dummy. And I have to believe that he knew Benvena had bellyached. So if he didn't go directly to Gotti and he went to somebody else, I'm sure Gotti knew about it, that he was bellyaching about the issue. But Benvena disappearing had everything to do with his complaints and bellyaching than anything else. And I think Gotti knew goddamn well who killed Billy Batts and why he disappeared. Because Gotti and Burke were too close for that not to be the case. Now, Jimmy, knowing that Tommy killed Foxy Jethro, knowing that Tommy had problems, he acts first to save himself any more fucking headaches. He sent word he wanted to see Tommy at his house. And on the night of January 14th of 1979, Tommy arrives, he sits down in Jimmy's kitchen. And when he's not looking, Jimmy pulls out a .38 and blows his fucking head off. His body was dismembered and his parts were sent to a scrapyard. John Gotti did not kill Tommy DeSimone. Nobody else did it but Jimmy. And it handled all of Jimmy's problems. It was an eye for an eye and satisfied the Gambinos. Anybody who says otherwise doesn't understand the life at all. I'm just telling you the truth. Another facet of this film that they get wrong is when it comes to Paul Vario. Henry didn't meet Paulie at any cab stand. In fact, he actually meets Jimmy through Tommy, and then through Jimmy, he meets Tootie, then eventually Paulie. All of these ideas that Henry Hill and Paulie were close was a complete fabrication of events that never happened. Henry was associated with Jimmy Burke, not the Lucchese crime family. So much was woven throughout the film about Henry being tight with all of these Lucchese associates. And he knew people 100%, don't get me wrong, but it was his association with Jimmy Burke that was important, not Paul Vario. In fact, he was never an associated member on record with the Lucchese crime family, but he was an associate of Jimmy Burke. He worked for Jimmy Burke, not Paul Vario. So what was John Gotti's role in Lufthansa? Because that it seems to be what a lot of people want to know. And simple, he was a cleanup guy. As you know, Stax Edwards, who drove the getaway van, was supposed to drop the van back into New Jersey, where John Gotti was waiting for him at a scrapyard. John's job was to make sure that the van got crushed and disappeared. Instead of heading to New Jersey after the job, Stax goes and gets high and hangs out with a girl, falls asleep. And as a result of his negligence, the feds not only find the van, but they get fingerprints. A few hours after the heist, John Gotti waits and waits and waits and waits. And as it got later and later, he makes a call to Vinny Asaro. And he explains, Stax never showed. And he tells John, go home, don't worry about it. A few days later, Stax is killed. And that's really how that went down. Now, Henry Hill never killed nobody, but he was at the scene of several murders. However, oftentimes Henry Hill would brag about murders, but the reality is, in his paperwork, he was never accused of a murder. In fact, in his paperwork, most of the crimes he ever committed were basically drug offenses, extortion, credit card scams, and etc. In fact, in Hill's paperwork, the information that he did provide was circumspect in terms of what information he could provide on Paul Vario. And most of that information about Paul Vario was fourth-hand accounts. And there was not really enough evidence to substantiate any of it. However, where Hill was imperative to the prosecution was in terms of Jimmy Burke. And reality is, especially if you know the right people to ask, Henry Hill was a hanger-on with a little business acumen and didn't know how to make money. All the scenes in Goodfellas which show a half-wealthy Henry Hill are exploitations of the truth. And what people rarely discuss is how much money he owed loan sharks. He owed Jimmy a ton of money, and his schemes were not paying off in any sense. Drugs? Yeah, Henry Hill did more blow than he ever sold. Those scenes with the girl in the hat, it's all bullshit. While Henry dabbled in moving drugs, it wasn't his operation, but the operation of other people. Henry put the people together and took a small cut, which he put up his fucking nose. It further backs up what others have said, is that Paul Vario wouldn't have let anyone doing drugs like Hill and Tommy DeSimone live very long. And especially wouldn't let them in his house. And most of Hill's story can be refuted so much so that he appears he was merely just a guy people felt bad for. They end up making a mole out of a mountain. And for the detractors who are going to say, well, he did put away 50 people, including Vario and Burke, I have this to say to you. The information about Burke was because Henry was around him day after day after day, but Paul Vario had a gazillion charges pending against him, put against him, that Hill had no knowledge of or involvement in. In fact, if you look at the case, the only information that Henry Hill provided against Paul Vario, which proves he wasn't around him, to the extent that he claims, was that Paul Vario got him early release by setting up a fake restaurant job. So you people are going to say, well, then they knew each other. Yes, they knew each other. They weren't that tight, but they were trying to do him a favor. But because Paul Vario does that favor for him, he gets 4 years in prison. So ask yourself this. Surely if Henry Hill knew Paul Vario to the extent so well that he claimed, he could have buried him. And he didn't because he could not provide actual fucking intel. Because he wasn't around Paul Vario. His second set of charges were for extortion, Paul Vario, in which Hill did testify about, but it was other witnesses who were used in that trial that had firsthand information about that extortion, and under questioning, Henry Hill admitted that he didn't know the specifics but believed it to be true. So once again, they're using, oh, do you think this is true? Oh, I think it is, so let's hammer him. Wiretaps and witnesses hammered Paul Vario for 14 years in prison. Henry Hill had little to nothing to do with putting Paulie Vario away. Hill did more damage to Jimmy Burke than anybody else. And that was because he was directly associated with Jimmy Burke and not Paul Vario. And so while history is always going to love this film, and, rightfully so, the realities of those stories are steeped in a lot of Hill's imagination, more so than in reality. And we talk all the time about informants perjuring themselves online. Go watch Howard Stern videos and the stories Henry Hill tells. It's ludicrous. It's insane. And it's not to take away that Henry Hill wasn't an associated member, because he was, at least on the fringe. But that film made him into some kind of mob juggernaut that he never fucking was. And it's a great film, and I'm not trying to destroy the myth of the film. It's a fantastic film. But the reality of who Henry Hill really was, the reality of the things that they had to do to make the story more palatable, because of course it makes sense. Henry owns a bar. Billy Batts comes in. He runs his mouth at Tommy, who's a fucking maniac. Tommy kills him. Now they got a big problem because this other crime family is going to be upset. So from a writing aspect, you have to do it that way, because the truth wouldn't make any fucking sense. Because in that film, Jimmy Burke is not nearly as violent as Tommy, but in all honesty, it's flipped. Tommy was a crazy fuck. Don't get me wrong. But Jimmy was more violent than Tommy. Tommy had like intermittent explosive temper, whereas Jimmy just would kill you. And there were 9 murders. I think 9 to 11, something like that, after Lufthansa heist. Jimmy killed everybody that was owed money because he didn't want to fucking pay them. And Henry Hill, in that woven tapestry that we know of Lufthansa, had nothing to do with nothing. It was all Tommy DeSimone's idea, his plan. He gives it to Jimmy after Paul tells him to. And the rest is history. And the proof is always in the paperwork. That's what I always say. The proof is in the paperwork. Of the paperwork that I was able to acquire about Henry Hill, if he was as tight with Paul Vario as he claimed, Paul Vario, after that first trial, forget about it. 4 years, whatever, 14 years, he would have gotten fucking life without, like 70 fucking indictment charges, 120 charges on an indictment. But it's because Henry Hill didn't know him like that, wasn't exactly as close as he claimed. He couldn't provide the information. Other people had to. And that's just the truth. It's a great story, but that's what it is. It's a fucking story. Nothing more. Nothing less. All right, so that's what we have to say about the Lufthansa heist. We are going to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to get into the Philadelphia mob war of 1990, and it's going to be a several-part series, probably 3. And hopefully you'll enjoy today, because today we're going to set up a bunch of different things that are going to happen. But like I said, this is a street perspective look at how this began, how history repeats itself, and how history always will in Philadelphia. I mean, even from the outset, the 1910s, This is how Philadelphia has always been. But it has been quiet for 20, well, not 20 years, but quiet for a long time. But we always say on the show, history repeats itself, and we're going to prove to you today of how it does. I don't know if it's something in the water in South Philly or whether or not just people have a certain mindset there that have always come across. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to get to the South Philadelphia mob war of the 1990s. Stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio.
Baby, when I think about you, I think about love. Darling, I don't live without you and your love. If I had those golden dreams of my yesterday, I would wrap you in the heaven, but really dying on the way. Feel like making, feel like making love, feel like making love, feel like making love, feel like making love to you. Baby, if I think about you, I think about love. Darling, if I live without you, I live without love. And if I had the sun and moon, and they were shining, I would give you both night and day love satisfying. Feel like making, ever had. Well, fill up down to your freedom, shine on me. I love you, shine a light through the eyes of the one left behind. Shine the light, shine the light, shine the light, won't you shine the light? Fill up down to your freedom and love. Yes, I do. If you choose to, you can live your life alone. Some people choose the city, some others choose the good old family home. I like living easy without family ties. Till the whip-poor-will of freedom's happening right between their eyes. 'Cause I live and breathe this Philadelphia freedom. From the day
We get illy, tough like South Philly. Got the cold steel, it's about to get chilly. Major figures like Gilly, I'm an outlaw kid Billy. How the fuck am I funny? You'll get slapped silly. Learn from the OGs, respect what you're shown. Real stand-up guys like Sonny Mazzone and Joey Merlino. We bring beef like Gino, steak out at your house with a hidden name Nino. I know the gutter real well. My dudes coming through with that gunpowder smell. If you can't tell, I enjoy hell. G's moving silent, you'll never hear me yell. Stand up guys rise, no disguise, we in the place. Thick ass thieves, nobody is safe. Reality rap, don't test the waters. Cold of the streets, you gotta follow orders. Stand up guys rise, no disguise, we in the place. Thick ass thieves, nobody is safe. Reality rap, don't test the waters. Cold of the streets, you gotta follow orders. Knock around guys, wise to the Avways, better than most. Even on my bad days, meetings in cafes, strip clubs and bars. At any time it's rock and roll, but we don't have guitars. Fuck fancy cars, I'm low key in the beat. I know a couple young boys who stay with the heater. Need a chick like Drita, Rob Paul to pay Peter. You couldn't walk in my shoes, not even half a meter. Young Turks, smack off your smirks on what they don't wanna see, like a million Jimmy Perks. Stand up guys rise, no disguise, we in the place. Thick ass thieves, nobody is safe. Reality rap, don't test the waters. Cold of the streets, you gotta follow orders. Stand up guys rise, no disguise, we in the place. Thick ass thieves, nobody is safe. Reality rap, don't test the waters. Cold of the streets, you gotta follow orders.
And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. All right, so we are going to get into the mob war of the 1990s in Philadelphia. And of course, anytime we do this, one of the things that I like to do is I like to give you a bit of background. Now, I don't want to go crazy with the background just because we would be here 3 months doing this. So what we're going to do today is just a little bit of background, and we're going to set it up for what is about to happen in the 1990s. Now, for those of you that are watching this, I did not include a lot of pictures in this sequence. And the reason why I didn't is because next week I'm going to put together a little film. And I would rather play that and show you some different things and show you some other photos next week. I just thought I would keep it very simple this week, keep it very simple as far as what's on the screen, not to confuse everybody, because a lot of this is history, and most of you, considering your mob genre aficionados, you already know who these guys are. So we're going to get into it. And like I said, stay with me this week, because once we get to next week, it's going to be gunshots, mayhem, and a bloodbath. Okay. So here we go. I'm trying to, there we go. Here we are. All right. So often on this show, we take a stroll down memory lane a bit. And I always try to give you, I didn't realize I talk with my hands as much as I do. Anyway, I always try to give you the cold hard facts, followed by a dissertation of sorts about the life from a different side of the tracks. And one of the topics that I rarely discuss is the mob wars that took place in South Philadelphia in the 1990s. And I've stayed away from that just out of respect for people I know, people I may not know, and just because it was so political. For months, I've been wanting to discuss this particularly in depth. Maybe not all of the who's who involved, but I wanted to give you a viewpoint from the street level up, so you can understand everything that was in play and the reasons for it. And after some discussions with some people that I know, I've decided to go down that road a little bit today and next week and maybe the week after. And while I could be like every other fucking imbecile, like the Jeff Nadeau's of the fucking world, I'm not going to be that guy. Certain guys I'm just not going to talk about unless somebody's convicted of something. I'm not bringing it up. There is no point, because to me, allegations are not provable. They're allegations. And I'm not throwing shade for the sake of views and clicks. That's not how I operate. Perhaps, and maybe too, I may or may not be close to some of the names you might hear about. And I would never disrespect them like that. And maybe, as my Kujin would tell me, they can say whatever the fuck they want. You know me, I know you. Good luck trying to fucking prove it. It's just that simple to me. And unless you can prove it, you shouldn't even waste your fucking time by saying it. Now, some of this is going to be regurgitation, because I'm going to cover Angelo Bruno, Phil Testa, Nicky Scarfo to John Stampa to Joey Merlino in a medium form. And I don't want to go into the entirety of their lives, because each of these men could have their own show in and of itself. And what I want to do is give you the facts and then dive into the street perspective of all of that. Philadelphia gets a hard knock because they're overshadowed historically by New York. So I want you to sit back, grab some snacks, hit a bong, whatever it is you people do, and enjoy this one. Because I want you to leave not just this episode, but this little series saying, wow, look at what a small contingency did to change the projection of the Mafia in Philadelphia. While I'm not going to get into the players as much as some of you may like, I think the focus is doing something, is doing this differently than everybody else could ever do it. That's what I want to do. I'm going to insert my opinion into a lot of it. And opinions are not to be considered facts in most cases. But knowing people how I do, I have a little bit of a different understanding than a lot of other people. And this is probably the closest that I can take you to the head of the line, to the front door, to the last step on the ladder. You feel what I'm saying? So with that, we're going to get into it. So the Philadelphia Mafia has been in existence for 123 years. And when you think of that number and the fact that Philly truly has only had 10 bosses in their history, each boss averages 12 and a half years at the top. Now, granted, not every single guy lasted that long, but it's just doing the math. It's the average. If you take that and then you compare it to New York, Philadelphia has some serious longevity at the top. However, the two bosses with the longest reign are obviously going to be Angelo Bruno at 21, 22 years, and allegedly Joey Merlino, depending on when you believe he took over and if he's still in charge, and that would be 25 years. Comparing that to New York, it's a staggering average. It really is a staggering average. And I don't think any of you have ever thought that before, thought about it like that. And Philadelphia got its start in the same way that a million other organized crime groups got their start. Immigrants flooded the country, and many members of the Black Hand flooded America. And in fact, the Black Hand was established in 1750 in Naples. By the year 1900, they were on the move to America, settling in San Francisco, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, New Orleans, Scranton, Boston, Detroit, et cetera, in a small town called Hillsville, Pennsylvania. And in fact, it would become their headquarters in Western Pennsylvania itself. But it wasn't their only headquarters because they had other headquarters in other places, but that was the main place. And that's where they trained killers to use a knife, stilettos specifically. And then eventually it would head east to Philadelphia. Salvatore Sabella, who was born in Italy in 1891, would head for American shores after his release from prison in Milan, Italy, at 17 years old. He would arrive in New York and join the D'Aqua crime family, and he would work closely with Giuseppe Traina before being sent south down to Philadelphia to be the first recognized boss of Philadelphia in 1919. His directive was simple. He was to go there and form a mob family. He would recruit John Avena and Angelo Bruno, both who would become bosses in their own right in Philadelphia. At the time, Sabella was establishing his turf, the Lanzetta gang, led by Leo Lanzetta and his brothers Pius and Ignatius, pretty much had their own turf set up in South Philadelphia. If you've never been to South Philly, it's small. This shit is all going to take place within 12 fucking blocks, 14 blocks. And that's what's fucking insane about this. They control drugs, extortion, and more. They aligned themselves with Michael Falcone and Louis Del Rossi, who had the market cornered on narcotics operations. The lay of the land, and like I just said, if you've never been to South Philly, it's not big. And I say that so you can understand what I'm about to say and have said and will probably say 100,000 times the rest of my life. In Philadelphia, it's small. Philadelphia is a small area. And from day one, the group has always tried to control the small areas. But there's always more than one group. They're always vying for power. So you have the Lanzettas, you have Falcone, you have Del Rossi on one side, and on the other you have Sabella, Joe Bruno, the Polish mob boss Mike Cusick, Jewish mob boss Max Hoff. All these groups are vying for turf and power in like a 14-block area. There's not a lot of wiggle room. So as prohibition kicks in, groups are beginning to jockey for position. The Lanzettas want control of everything. They weren't just looking to control illegal booze, but they began to move in on the numbers rackets as well. And as things begin to get tense, a war begins brewing. Sorry, my unprofessional ass with my phone. Mincha. All right. And they just, like I said, they weren't looking to control just illegal booze, but began to move in on the numbers rackets. And as things begin to get tense, people start to get a little pissy. And remember how I always say history repeats itself. Always. And it always will. With a lot of jockeying and turf on the menu, Sabella moves in on Leo Lanzetti and has him killed. Shots would be fired back and forth, but ultimately because the police suspected that Sabella was behind the shooting and the subsequent 2 more murders, they wanted him investigated. And it turns out that the brother of one of the victims, a guy by the name of Anthony Zangi, drops a dime, calls the cops, and then the police round up Sabella for questioning. They find out he's an illegal alien. You're not even supposed to be here. And even though Sabella was acquitted of that murder charge by 1927, he gets thrown out of the fucking country, and he hands the reins over to John Avena on an interim basis. Sabella wouldn't be back in Philadelphia till after the Castellammarese War. And then he would take control of the Philadelphia Mafia again, but it was very incredibly short-lived. After seeing the Castellammarese War and having made enough money, he retires at like age 40 from the Mafia, moves to Norristown, where he lives peacefully until he dies in 1962. So when John Avena takes over in 1931, he's a juggernaut. Not only did he have a huge numbers racket, but he also moved headfirst in narcotics trafficking. He controlled Passyunk Avenue between Washington and Christian and controlled the local police precinct there, which was on 7th and Carpenter. The location, I think, now is actually a fucking library. So if you're from that area, go look. I think it's a library now, 7th and Carpenter. So Avena was moving the Philadelphia Mafia into a very big family. And the Lanzettas, still pissed off over the death of Leo, get into a car on August 17th of 1936, drove to the corner of Passyunk and Washington and opened up fire on Avena and one of his Jewish conglomerate guys, Martin Fieldstein. Both were killed on the spot, drive-by shooting. And I cannot tell you enough how small Philadelphia is. You want to talk about ghosts? I bet you South Philly's got some fucking ghosts, my friends. So both get killed on the spot. And anytime that you have groups fighting over small turf, this is what happens. But Philadelphia, from the first boss to the next 70 fucking years, the streets are going to be filled with blood. 1959 to 1980 was the only peaceful time, for the most part, in Philadelphia's existence. And that's fucking crazy to me. And as I said, I don't want to go through all of the bosses because we'd be here all day, but Joe Bruno takes over in 36. He's dead by 46. Joe Ida takes over in 46, gets deported in 58. And that makes way for Antonio Mr. Miggs Polina in 1958. And the situation that's about to go on between Bruno and Polina, we've seen before a million different times and in a million different ways. And as I said, I'm not going to go into everything, but I'm going to highlight certain events, especially this. So when Joe Ida flees the United States on narcotics violations, he basically hands the family over to Polina. Polina, who was a huge earner for the mob, he worried, and I don't want to get into the entirety of this, but he worried that Angelo Bruno was surreptitiously jockeying for a position and wanted him dead. And the problem is, and I want you to see this from the inside out, because even if Polina deserved the nod, even if he deserved to be there, the sheer power that Angelo Bruno derived from Carlo Gambino was insane. And that friendship was enough to worry a lot of people. Polina, and many have said he was greedy and didn't want to play ball, but really he was in a position that he could not win. No matter what he tried to do, he wasn't going to fucking win. But rather than sit back and wait, he wanted to act. The problem is, Bruno's tipped off about Polina's plan and he runs to New York City and he sees Carlo Gambino. Polina had ordered his underboss Ignazio Denaro to clip Bruno. And for whatever the reason, Denaro runs to Bruno and tells him, sort of a Joe Colombo kind of fucking move. And we can't argue that Denaro was going to move up the chain by doing that. He ends up kind of sort of doing it, but I think Denaro recognized the power that Bruno could wield through Carlo Gambino. And maybe he felt that Polina was setting him up. And it's a situation where you have to back the right fucking horse. Plain and simple. So Bruno more or less sends word to Carlo Gambino about Polina's move or his desires to move. The commission meets, and because Bruno and Gambino have a long history of making money together, the commission sides with Angelo Bruno. Now, when I say side, I don't think Bruno went to argue who should be the boss. Bruno was very calculated in what he does. He basically explains, look, this guy wants to kill me out of spite, envy, ego, I don't know what the fuck it is, but by our code, he can't do that. And the commission agrees. And then perhaps in an odd judgment, he gives permission to Bruno to kill Polina. And it's an odd move considering you'd think that the commission would rather have peace than an incident like that because it creates instability. The commission not only sanctions his murder, but also strips him of any power, which I don't know what the basis for that, the argument from that perspective was, other than that he was going to kill Bruno. But it's obvious that Bruno's friendship with Carlo Gambino is going to pay off. And Bruno's basically given permission to hit Polina. But does he know? He doesn't. Bruno basically takes over as boss. He decides just to absorb power, and he leaves Polina to just basically wither away. Now, Polina just accepts that, and in 1977 actually attempts to regain power within the family by asking to be named consigliere when Joe Regnetta dies. But Bruno refuses, naming instead Antonio Caponegro his consigliere, which would turn out to be a huge fucking mistake in judgment. But what's funny is Polina outlives all of these motherfuckers. He died in 1993 at 100 years old. And you know, he lived off Snyder, which was, I think, like 5 or 6 houses down from Bruno. They were neighbors. That must have been an interesting situation. I wonder how many times Polina sat on his porch saying, you know, I can kill this prick right now. Take over everything. It is what it is. So with Bruno taking over the ranks, it was a different look for the Philadelphia Mafia. Bruno wasn't a pacifist by any stretch, but he looked at organized crime as a business, one that should flourish, because the bottom line is money. Whereas those before him would use murder as a tool of the trade, Bruno was a little bit different. He preferred business to run smooth. So murder was not the equalizer for him. And as a result of leaning more on business than murder and mayhem, Philadelphia would move into the union rackets, and all of the rackets, for that matter, became insanely wealthy. With power comes friends, and Bruno used those friendships in the government to his advantage to skate indictments and to escape press clippings. As we said, Bruno would move into the traditional rackets, gambling, extortion, union, corruption, loan sharking, but the one thing that Bruno had a tough stance on was narcotics. He just didn't want anybody involved in it. For 20 fucking years, Angelo Bruno ran a crime family successfully. But there were issues, and there were big issues. Bruno had his beliefs, and he didn't want to give up Atlantic City for any reason. Most of the mafia back in New York saw otherwise. They all wanted a cut of the action, but Bruno refused to allow them into the area, at least casino-wise. But he did allow other mob families to get in on the action in Atlantic City for the cut of the proceeds, which included bookmaking, loan sharking, extortion, etc. The move, which one can't dispute, was meant to suffice the mob in New York. He wouldn't budge on them moving into the casinos. But he was not opposed to letting them get into some stuff for a cut of the proceeds. And in return, New York kept Chicago the fuck out of Atlantic City. And that was the trade-off. Chicago got Vegas, and New York could take small pieces of Vegas, but Chicago had to stay the fuck out of Atlantic City. And I think largely New York did that in hopes that Angelo Bruno would change his mind down the road, or that maybe down the road Bruno wouldn't be in charge anymore and somebody else would be willing to let them step in. And I always think much of what we saw from 1980 through the 90s had a lot to do with Atlantic City, albeit some of the jockeying from other crime families. And it was the centerpiece as to why New York wanted control of Philadelphia from day one, because it always led to Atlantic City. As we said, narcotics was not a part of Bruno's world. He saw it as dirty, vulgar, and wouldn't allow his men to get involved. And if you remember earlier, we said that he would not let his guys get involved. And we said that the area and the turf was small. And for everybody to earn, you have to get inventive. And drugs was just the quickest, easiest way, especially meth. And the core issue is 2 things happen. In 1976, Carlo Gambino dies. With his death, Bruno loses really a lot of the strength and power he had in New York. Gambino backed him in every way, and vice versa. But with Paul Castellano taking over, it was a different regime, a different thought process. Even Russell Buffalino by 1977 had lost a lot of the power that he wielded. And it was just a change in life in general. And it was a change in mobland. Now, Castellano, for his part, didn't like drugs either. He was not opposed, nor was anybody else, of taking profits. But Castellano wanted it far removed from him, which is why he allowed his cousins, a crew based in Cherry Hill, a.k.a. the Cherry Hill Gambinos, to move drugs. And it was a move that facilitated a few things. Number one, Castellano could take all the profits from it without having to be within 10 feet of it. And the problem was that Angelo Bruno had the same sort of belief, but for some reason or another, probably likely money, he allows that move to be made and takes huge kickbacks from that. And it's one thing to say, no, you can't do X, Y, Z, but it's another to say you can't do it and then allow another crime family into your turf to do this. And this is sort of where I want to put you at the street level. Philadelphia is always so big, right? And you have representatives from all 5 crime families in New Jersey. And then you have the DeCavalcante crime family. How much fucking room do you really have without stepping on toes? And the quickest way is narcotics. But you won't allow anybody to do it, but rather you're going to put your hands in the fucking cookie jar and allow everybody else to fucking earn off of it, and then tell your people go fuck themselves. You can make a fortune, you could take a kickback, but everybody else has to fucking starve. Even a traditionalist like Carlo Gambino would have not been so giving. And it's like rolling out the red carpet for another crime family, going inside and then seeing them eat steak, and meanwhile you have nothing to fucking eat. And meanwhile, it's like next door to you. It was bad optics from the inside out. But Bruno probably was making the best decision he could make at the time because he was heavily surveilled and didn't want eyes on him, especially for narcotics. And it sets the stage for some very, very, very unhappy motherfuckers. And with Carlo dead and in the ground, logically, I think many knew that Castellano wasn't going to get involved in a Philadelphia beef because, different than Gambino, Paul was all about money and business and staying out of things that didn't benefit him or his crime family. And getting involved in South Philadelphia politics wasn't going to help. So, Antonio Caponegro, he doesn't like what he sees. Caponegro was a lifelong thug and a gangster. He came up under Riccardo Biondi, and over the years rose to the rank and becomes consigliere for Angelo Bruno. With indictments coming for Angelo Bruno, many on the street level wanted to take back what they saw that they rightfully owned. Caponegro saw the drug trade as open and freewheeling, and there was so much money to be made. Why can't they get involved? And it's very similar to the scene in The Godfather when Vito Corleone sits down with Virgil Sollozzo. Well, Corleone didn't want to get involved and didn't want a fucking thing to do with narcotics. Tom Hagen makes a great argument because he understands the value. Yeah, it's a dirty business, but if they don't involve themselves, it's going to allow another group to move in, become rich, become powerful, so much so it could overtake them. It was a strong argument. And the difference here is that Caponegro wanted in. And with Bruno in charge, it's just not going to happen. So he takes matters into his own hands. Ego is a powerful thing, but only if you wield it correctly. So once again, this is history repeating itself. Caponegro is smart enough to know a couple of things. Number one, Bruno doesn't have Gambino to lean on. But if he can gain backing from the commission or somebody from the commission to hit Bruno, then it's a successful transfer of power. At the time, Phil Testa was the underboss. Naturally, if Bruno were to die, or if he were to go to prison, the logical successor would have been Caponegro. So Caponegro needs help from a friend, or albeit somebody who could back him in return for a piece of Atlantic City maybe. Caponegro reaches out to Frank Funzi Thierry, and at the time, Thierry was the front boss for Benny Squint Lombardo, or the reverse of that. And the reason why I say that is because many say that Thierry was actually the boss and Benny Squint was really the front. I personally believe that Benny Squint was the front. I've always believed that. And I say that because Thierry carried weight. A front boss doesn't carry a ton of weight only because in reality, it's a title. It's a front. The boss is the boss. And Caponegro, especially given their tepid relationship, could have gone right to Lombardo. So why doesn't he? He goes directly to Thierry. And that sort of tells me that Thierry is the one who carried all the weight at that time. Otherwise, why the fuck bother? So Caponegro and Thierry, they go way back. They had always knocked heads from day one. Long ago, Thierry, operating in New Jersey, had a beef with Caponegro, who was moving into North Jersey, and what Thierry considered his turf, specifically numbers and bookmaking and loan sharking. Now, Caponegro wouldn't have it, and a sit-down was called for to dispute their issue. Caponegro wins the sit-down, and Thierry seethed the rest of his fucking life over that. Caponegro reaches out, he explains the idea, and Thierry was all for it. And the reason why Thierry was all for it was he wanted a cut of Atlantic City. And that's exactly what he wanted. Thierry simply placated Caponegro, and it gets back to him that the hit was sanctioned, go for it. And what Thierry is doing here is he's setting up Caponegro. On March 21st of 1980, while sitting in a car with John Staffa, Bruno is hit from behind with a sawed-off shotgun. Staffa escapes and goes into hiding immediately. Within a few days of that murder of Bruno, Caponegro gets sent for. Caponegro, believing that everything had been cleared by New York, is confused. He's told to bring Alfred Salerno, his brother-in-law, with him. So when Caponegro goes to the meeting, he sees that Thierry's in attendance. And whatever safeguard that he thought he had in Funzi, he was wrong. The commission explains they never sanctioned that. They never would. They wouldn't even give it a thought. But they wanted to know who the hell gave him permission to do that. He looks at Thierry, who immediately claimed he knew nothing about it and was repulsed by what happened. April 18th of 1980, both Caponegro and Salerno are found dead and naked in the back of a trunk in the Bronx. And anybody else that they thought was involved were tortured and killed. The commission thought that they could render control of the Mafia in Philadelphia. And they would be completely fucking wrong. They would be completely fucking wrong. New York has always thought they could control them, but they can't. All hell is about to break loose for the next 4 years in Philadelphia. And it would claim over 20 lives. Any stability that they hoped for, or any stability they could bring, was out the fucking window. Even with the commission wanting stability in the background, are men who see the instability at the top, men who by design are going to throw caution to the wind and essentially do exactly what Caponegro did. And sadly, for some odd fucking reason, they expect different results, which is going to lead us to a question to ponder over the next week. Why would anyone attempt to do what Antonio Caponegro did and expect to survive that? Unless we have some double dealing going on. And the more I've thought about this, there had to be some sort of double dealing going on. Because nobody's that fucking stupid. Why would you be stupid enough to try the same fucking thing and expect a different fucking outcome? Oh, he did it. He failed. New York killed him. We'll just do it again. They won't kill us this time. Like, that's the definition of insanity. Everybody knows what that is. Doing the same exact thing over and over and expecting a different result. Phil Testa is about to become boss. And it's going to be blood, bullets, and mayhem. And nail bombs. In a short period, we are about to see 4 new bosses, a lot of blood and jockeying by a young group to restore sanity and tradition back into Philadelphia at the cost of more bullets and blood. Whatever Angelo Bruno was able to accomplish, the mob is about to lose in many, many ways in Philadelphia. For Bruno's passivity, men with ego and desire are about to obliterate the idea that the Mafia can do business without mayhem. Mayhem is on the menu, and anybody who gets in the fucking way is going to be killed. And history, again, will repeat itself. Even if the players are different, even if the time period is different, it's almost like the blood never dried on the corner. Even with Bruno's 20-year run, he ends up in a pile of his own blood and brains. And it seems to open the door for the Wild Wild West. So when we come back next week, we're going to usher in a new era in Philadelphia, but with the same results. We'll even talk about New York imposing themselves to the point where it only makes the desires of those coming up more irate. And there is an old saying that you should leave well enough alone. And New York, by proxy, tries to control it. But the levee just breaks, and the shooting begins. There you have it. That is the show for this week. Please, please, please come back for next week. Shoot us an email at mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com. Let us know of what you thought of this show. And so the best way to close out this show is our old theme song, and we will see everybody here next week on Mob Talk Radio.
Jeff Canarsie, Mob Talk Radio. Check it out. Yo, we stay quiet like Russell Buffalino. When things will get ugly like Pepsi's death in Casino. Who do we know? No one, nobody. But we're all well respected like Delacroix and Gotti. I know wild nights, a van and nocturne. Light up a cigar and watch your spot burn. You'll get patty whacked, I'm tough like Irish dock workers. Run with guys, hooligans and block lurkers. Corner berserkers, street savvy soldiers. You owe, you better pay. Don't make me say I told you. Code you don't betray, I say what I mean. Providence and Brooklyn all the way to the Bean. I'd rather be unseen, like Vinny the Chin. I don't gotta go to Vegas to see cities of sin. Pull the pin, drop bombs like Danny Green. I write homicide like the murder machine. Lansky Luciano, mastermind the racket. Up in the clam house with a milli in my jacket. Move around when the streets get darker. Pay homage to real bosses like Gambino and Patriarcha. Mob talking, but you don't talk to the mob. Lord Will and Jeff Canarsie, we stay on our job. This is mob talk, straight from the streets. Mob talk, the life over beats. Lord Will and Jeff Canarsie, bringing you the real. Kill all rats, you already know the deal. This is mob talk, straight from the streets. Mob talk, the life over beats. Lord Will and Jeff Canarsie, bringing you the real. Kill all rats, you already know the deal.